Hello everyone, 76 Patriot here, and today I just wanted to take several moments and break down some of the primary election results and special election results that occurred last night. So yesterday was June 25th, and we had several primaries happening across the country. We had them in South Carolina, New York, Colorado, and Utah, I believe, in that order. So I'll just start by looking at the first one. This was a runoff to occur in South Carolina's 3rd district. And this was between, so Cheri Biggs very, very narrowly won by just about 1,000, less than 1,000, slightly over 1,000 votes. And Mark Burns was the Trump-backed candidate who was more conservative. He'd kind of made some statements in the past. He'd been a little bit in the public eye in South Carolina politics surrounding Trump and very close to Trump. And he narrowly lost to Cheri Biggs, who was endorsed, I believe, by Henry McMaster, the state's governor. And so this was a little bit mixed for me. I was kind of more rooting for Burns, hoping that he would pull it off, just because he was more conservative choice here. But in the end, it really doesn't matter, because Cheri Biggs will still be more conservative than Jeff Duncan. She'll still be a better fit, at least in my opinion, from what I've read. Both of these candidates were both more conservative than the outgoing representative. So that's good to see, I think, right there. Really, the next piece of news, pull this up here, was the New York primary elections. And a number of these races, as you can see, were uncontested. Like, they literally, neither party ran anybody. And for some of them, that's understandable. It would have been nice to get some of these kind of rhino, more establishment type people out. But, oh well. AOC, this is really kind of one of the only notable things, apart from the big story in New York, which I'll get to. AOC had a challenger, but it was nothing. It didn't amount to anything. They got 18%. It's too bad, but whatever. Maybe another time. We'll definitely come back to the 16th district. Just to get another one out of the way, let's go to the 24th district really quick. So Claudia Tenney is an incumbent Republican who's more kind of leaning towards the establishment movement, I would say. And she actually had the Trump endorsement, interestingly enough, this time, which is unfortunate, I think. Mario Frado was a solid candidate on the issues. He just didn't have the traction, though. And so, honestly, it's amazing that he got this far. I mean, heck, he got almost 40% with, not a ton of funding, not a ton of even, heck, name recognition. And he still did that. So maybe next year, we'll see. It's disappointing, but it is encouraging to see how close some of these conservative challengers have gotten very close to endangering these more establishment incumbents. Now to the one everybody is talking about, even in the mainstream media. And this is the fact that Jamal Bowman, one of the kind of squad members, self-avowed kind of Democrat, socialist, progressive, went down last night. This is a great thing in my opinion. George Latimer, he's a Democrat endorsed by Hillary Clinton, I believe. But he's a Democrat, but he's not as crazy as Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman's the guy who practically tried to interrupt official House proceedings by pulling the fire extinguisher. And he is a guy that even George Latimer, heck, in the debate, kind of gave him a rebuke and was like, what about all the constituents in your district? Are you really, care for them at all? All those who aren't black or brown. What about Asians? What about Hispanics? Because Jamal Bowman is such a crazy leftist, for lack of better terminology. And, I'm not slandering the guy. That's what George Latimer said. So it is good to see that his views and such left-wing socialist views are still not mainstream in the Democratic Party, at least not, there's still kind of a movement within the Democrats that's moderate and in everyday voters. So that's good to see. Even though it's not great news for us as conservatives, we didn't flip the seat. I think it's good. New York State Assembly, some of these kind of socialist type people won, some of them didn't. I'm not really going to waste much time on this. There's not a ton of interesting things to see here. It's just the Democrat primaries. So, basically, Colorado is the next kind of piece of big news that happened. So we had some good results out of the state. You can see well, actually, let's start off. So Boebert's challenger, and I didn't expect her challengers to really amount to much. They basically split the vote, and she won handily, still, even with 40%. Really, several notable things here. Jeff Crank is going to win in the 5th district. He's replacing an outgoing representative. Same thing in, well, the 3rd is actually Jeff Hurd was a more moderate candidate that won. I think he'll win the 3rd. That's a district that's currently Lauren Boebert's district. She's switching to another district that I'll just point out in a moment. So it gets a bit confusing here in Colorado congressional districts. I think Hurd will win, um, especially if Trump's at the top of the ticket. And there's not a ton more to mention here, other than the special election. So Colorado's 4th district. This is Ken Buck is the incumbent representative. He actually resigned, and Greg Lopez won the special election, which we all expected. It's one of Colorado's few solidly Republican districts. However, the margin that he won it by is surprising in a good way. For Republicans, I thought this would be another one in which we kind of underperformed, and he maybe won it by 10, maybe 15. Guys, he won it by 24, nearly 24 points, which is, if we look back at 2022, basically identical to, at least very similar to the margin that Ken Buck won it by. So this is kind of a slap in the face to all these special election bros out there that are like, oh yeah, one special election and a Democrat improves by 20 points. Biden's going to win. It's going to be a blue wave year. I mean, we've heard that so many times, time and time again this year. And sure, it might be a trend that's not great. But regardless, all of a sudden, coincidentally, they're silent now on this one. And, that's just a little ridiculous, frankly, in my opinion, which is why special elections are not predictive, at least not typically. But that's a good sign, I think. So that's great. Republican turnout was high. And the interesting thing about this one, Greg Lopez is just a short-termer. He is not actually, this is a district that Lauren Boebert is running for, actually. So I just remembered, yeah, she's running for the 4th this time because she switched because she knew she'd be too vulnerable in the 3rd. So Greg Lopez is just going to be a short-termer, just going to fill out the remainder this year. And he's fairly decent from the things I've seen. Utah, lastly, this was a mess. On the whole, Utah was a mess. So, the biggest news was that John Curtis won. This is awful, guys. Mitt Romney there was a chance that we could, due to Mitt Romney's retirement, get a good senator, get at least an upgrade, at least a small upgrade, and somebody who's more America first, who is an actual conservative and doesn't try to sell America out. And unfortunately, that didn't happen because John Curtis is basically Mitt Romney. He's basically the second coming of Mitt Romney. I'm not going to venture to say he'll be identical. I think he may vote maybe a teeny bit to the right here and there, but he is basically one and the same. When it comes to his record, he's a big neocon. He's a proud moderate, kind of more liberal Republican type. And that's unfortunate. Trent Staggs was Trump endorsed. He was a good guy. And I understand the Trump endorsement in Utah probably doesn't do that much because Utahns don't exactly, aren't the biggest fans of Donald Trump. But regardless, he would have been, I think, the clear conservative choice here. And he went down fairly big. So that's sad to see, what the heck is up with Utah and their rhinos. I will never understand it. And the same can be said, unfortunately, for the governor's race. Spencer Cox, arguably, and I would make the case that he's probably the worst, certainly in the top 3 worst Republican governors in the nation. He is a very liberal guy, and he won, although not handily, and that's good to see. His challenger got, over 43%, which is showing not all the votes are counted yet. So that's showing that there was, a lot of dissatisfied people with Cox's performance. So that is a good thing, because he'll be term limited, I believe, after this time. I believe Utah has term limits. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But that's just too bad at the end of the day, because the Utah State GOP convention voted for, I believe, for Phil Lyman and Trent Staggs. Actually, I believe it's for Staggs. I'm not sure. But it definitely wasn't for Curtis. And unfortunately, in Utah, the convention results are not binding. So typically, they often vote for solid candidates and end up with rhinos who get voted in. So other than that, AG, I honestly haven't done much research on that race. Whatever. We're just going to be talking about the main ones here. And there's basically two congressional races to talk about really quick, and then it'll be done. Utah's second. We actually still don't know the results as of the time of this video. Over 80% of the votes are in. Malloy is the Trump-backed incumbent, and she is barely, the margin could very well change. Her margin could increase. But as of right now, she's barely hanging on against Colby Jenkins. I don't know too much about him. I just know he's endorsed by Mike Lee. Mike Lee is a pretty conservative guy, so I'm possibly assuming that he is to the right of Malloy. I'm not sure, though, so don't quote me on that. But we'll have to see what happens with that. That could get interesting. And then lastly, Mike Kennedy won the 3rd Congressional District to replace Jason Chaffetz. And he is decent, I think, for all intents and purposes, for what I've read. I think he's a pretty good conservative guy. So finally, one good thing, I guess, that happened out of the state of Utah. But other than that, I think it was kind of a disaster in some places and then very good in other places. Colorado's special, that was great. Jamal Bowman going down, that was great. Utah, not so much. Kind of a disaster, at least as far as Senate and governor are concerned. But, we got to move on, guys. We can't stay here. It's basically it for this video. And I may not put a video out tomorrow. We'll see. But I certainly will be talking about the debate. It's basically the next big thing in politics that's happening tomorrow on Thursday. And I hope Trump does really well and just, says a lot of things that will be pertinent for the country to hear. So we'll see how that happens, or what goes down with that. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.